the first time you call anybody, right, it's cold calling. That's what cold calling is, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And so it doesn't matter who you're calling for the first time. If it's the first time that you're reaching out, you're going to feel it. It's going to be cold, but it doesn't have to be freezing. There's a lot of anxiety that sometimes comes in, and I've done a ton of training about how do you get past the anxiety, or how do you minimize the anxiety from cold calling, right? I'm not going to suggest that you get rid of it. I'm very experienced. I've been doing this 30 years, and I still have a level of anxiety. You just have the ability to get through that anxiety. But if you can develop comfort around cold calling, and you can make it this daily habit, this daily skill that you practice, you're going to have the success that you want. You're going to increase your chances of winning contracts because you're able to make those cold calls to build new relationships, etc. One thing to keep in mind about cold calling is it happens throughout the entire, well, first off, your entire business. You're always going to do cold calling, but also it happens through the entire life cycle of the sales life cycle. It happens during business development. It happens during capture, and to me, proposal is just part of capture, right? It's the final output of capture, if you will, and those teams work together. And for us small businesses, it's often the same person. But the cold calling happens in each of those phases, and we'll talk more about that. But you also do cold calling to federal buyers, and you do cold calling to teammates, to industry out there. You can do this in many different ways, right? Two of the most important ways that you can think are common ways are reaching out through email and doing phone calls. Today, I just want to focus on cold calls as it relates to phone calls, since that tends to be the hardest thing. I think everybody's willing to do an email out there, but making a phone call, it starts to get a little scarier. So I really want to give you some cold calling tips that are going to lead to success and those cold calls being on phone. I want to break down today's training into three main sections. First thing I want to talk about is what you can do before you make the cold calls, before you make a phone call. I want to reinforce this idea of being realistic and the activities you can do that set the realism or realistic expectations so that you can have success. The second thing I'm going to cover is how, when they answer the phone, you can warm up that cold call just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a lot, right? You don't have to take your jacket off, but you unzip your jacket because you're not as cold anymore. Little things you can do. And then the last thing I want to talk about is just what do you do when you're doing these cold calls, but people aren't answering, they're not getting back to you? What can you do on the follow-up process? And I'll give you tips about that. So that's what we're going to cover in today's training. If you don't know who I am, my name is 𝗚𝗢𝗓. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I'm the co-founder of GovCon in a Box. And I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been helping people like you understand that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. And that's what I want for you. That's what you should be able to expect from cold calling, right? Is repeatable, predictable results. If I do this activity, I'm going to get this result. So that's a lot of fun for me, and that's why we do this training. I'm super excited today to talk about the Government Contracting Success Newsletter. If you're not a subscriber, join today, subscribe today here on LinkedIn. It's free, it's easy. But we just hit 18,000 subscribers today. We are the largest government contracting newsletter on LinkedIn by far. We're bigger than DOD's. We're double the size of anybody else in the industry. And it's because we keep providing value. We listen to you and we provide you value that helps you succeed in government contracting. So join us in the newsletter so you keep getting some of those tips. The other thing is, obviously, this little picture here is about today's training, the cold calling, but I'll be laying out next week's trainings tomorrow probably, and you'll see me drop it in LinkedIn. Make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter. More importantly, make sure you're following my LinkedIn profile and you hit the bell notification. When you hit that bell notification at the top, LinkedIn will make sure you don't miss the training. Okay, let's get rocking and rolling on, oh, wait, really quick. It's funny, this is like the fourth day, fifth day, and I still forget that I have this slide. I'm super excited to announce the newest people in the 100 Club, the newest companies in the 100 Club. So I told you I'm co-founder of a new company that we started called GovCon in a Box, and this is the tools behind all the training that I've been doing. So govconinabox.com, you can go there, but we have set up a federal visibility score so you can see how visible you are to federal buyers. And since yesterday, we had 5 new companies hit that 100 score. It means your small business profile, everything is done correctly. So you're maximizing your visibility to federal buyers when they come looking for you. So just wanted to welcome in Kamal from 6E Technology, Siri System. I like what you did there, Sumit, with your first initial last name. Symbiosis.io, Scott was really cool. Scott did two things. First off, he helped me get our GovCon in a box a little bit more secure by sending emails, this thing he worked on with me. But the thing I'm really proud about is how just in a few days, he took a score from 29 to 100. When he was at 29, his company was invisible. If a federal buyer was looking for a company like his, he would not be found, right? So going to a 100 score is not going to make you get contracts, but it's going to make you eligible to be seen. And if you don't do these things that we say, you're basically invisible. And so that's where we're driving. Scott, great job there. IXB, John Nixon, welcome to the IXB group. And then just a few minutes ago, and I don't know if this is the right way to say it, so Mukul, let me know, but 𝗡𝗘𝗜𝗓𝗦, that's an interesting company name, but they just came in like 20 minutes ago or something and hit that 100 score. So I was glad to bring you in here. Actually, Mukul worked with Cecilia, my sister, if you don't know that, to get that score going and to do what needs to be done. All right, last one. I just wanted to do a special recognition to ASCI Federal Services. Christine Hopkins has been in our community. She's probably in the chat right now. She's been a huge part of the community. And when we do volunteer activities like we just did with the Small Business Directory, small business specialists, so 1,000 small business pros around the country, she was right there helping us move that directory forward, doing a ton of calls. And so we really appreciate her effort. So I thought I'd give her a second shout out today. Okay, so we got 21 minutes and a lot of good stuff. And by the way, I have probably 20 or 30 other trainings on how to do cold calling. So make sure you go look at replays from other stuff I've done. But for today, I want to tackle it a little differently. Before the call, it's really important to be realistic in your expectations. The first bullet I talk about is know your purpose. When you're going to do cold calling and outreaching, you want to make sure you're kind of zeroing in on one agency and zeroing in on one reason for doing cold calling. That cold calling could be something as really straightforward as I'm trying to get in the door, right? But if you say I'm trying to get in the door of the Army, now you're focused, and it could still be I'm trying to talk to 100, 200 people or something. But if you know the purpose is trying to get in the door, then when you start making the cold calls, your messaging will be consistent. Compare that to if you move forward a little bit into the second bullet, learning about an opportunity. That's capture. If I've got an opportunity that's 6 or 12 months out and I'm trying to do some capture activity, then there might only be 10 or 20 people at most that I can do cold calls to. But here, I know my purpose is to talk about a particular opportunity. So again, the messaging will be a little differently. And then the third possibility you might have is purpose is getting a question answered, or maybe you want to get an introduction from this person to the next person. Just know your purpose, and it will help you focus. The next thing, going with the whole theme of being realistic, if you haven't seen this bell curve before, it's really important to understand the bell curve as it relates to just life in general. If you think about politics or trying to do stuff in your church or your community, etc., the bell curve that I'm going to describe always fits in. There's always going to be people who are on the left side of the bell curve, what we call innovators, early adopters, or early majority, who are going to pretty much agree with what you're saying or do what you want them to do. In this case, right, take your meeting or buy from you. There will always be the 50% on one side, and on the other side are 50%, the late majority, the laggards, who won't do what you want, right? So the laggards will never do what you want, and the late majority, 34% of them, will only do what you want if they have no other choice, which is totally fine. When you understand this in sales, you don't try to go after that second half on the right-hand side of the bell curve. You really focus on the innovators, early adopters, and early majority. So an example is if you make a phone call and somebody picks up the phone, this percentage is 2.5%. We'll sit there and go, oh my God, Neil, where have you been? I've wanted to sit there and talk to a company like yours. Let's talk right now. How can I bring you in? What can I answer for you? It'll be like the best phone call you ever have. But you got to call 100 people to find those 2.5 people. I don't know where the half person's coming from, but you get my point. And so the bell curve happens with the phone calls you make. If you call 100 people, basically 16%, 16 out of 100, might even answer the phone or pick it up, right? Or call you back if you leave a voicemail. If you call 100 people, the calls that are answered are going to be 16%, but those people you talk to, only 16% of those people will talk to you. Now, if you can say, hey, I've talked with other people, or we work within your agency, we're just calling you, now you increase the percentage and you really are starting to get 5 out of 10 people who will take your meetings. But keep that in mind, because it's really important to understand the expectation. You got to do a lot of activity in the beginning to build those relationships. The cool thing is, once you've done these cold calls for a little while, you'll have relationships that can then lead you to other people really fast. But you'll have to come back and do this whole cold calling and bell curve again if you want to get into a new agency, not the Army, but let's say Department of Education. So be realistic with your expectations before a call. And the last thing is, before the call, practice and do role playing around sales in your messaging when you're going to reach out to somebody. Too many people avoid this. They're like, I feel stupid, or I don't need practice, or you just don't do it. It's like, you've got to do this. Practice and role playing are two different things. Practice is me just practicing the speech. So if you heard me sit there and say, if you don't know who I am, my name's 𝗚𝗎𝗓. Welcome to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market, right? I wrote that down. I took the time to figure out what I wanted, and then I practiced that until I had it memorized. Then I started role playing with Gus, who's my colleague here and partner in the 𝗡𝗂𝗏 chamber, and said, hey, let me practice calling you or something. And then I would get silly with it on my own about, different voices or something until I was comfortable. If you want to have success and you're doing sales, you're going to be reaching out to people, develop your skills. If you were going to play basketball and you said you want to be a great basketball player, and I said you have to go out there and run sprints, back and forth, you're not going to say anything. You're just going to go out there and run sprints. And then you're going to come back and you're going to shoot hoops. And you're going to do this thing. I'm going to say, go to the side, go to the side. It's like, well, that's not how we play basketball. Basketball is like this. No. And so if I told you something athletic, you would do what I say. We'll do the same thing here. Practice to get good at sales. Don't just expect it to happen. Because the better you get at this, the more you practice and role play, the more you're comfortable in your message, which makes it a little easier to do the calls and to pick up the phone and call 100 people a day, or 25. Okay, so let me give you some tips on they pick up the phone, right? And by the way, I teach that when you're trying to get meetings, I always like to make a first phone call and say, can I schedule a follow-on call, right? The whole point is I want to schedule a meeting with you a week from now, so that now I've secured the meeting, I can go research you further. I know enough about you that I'd like to meet you, but I haven't prepared enough. And so I'm catching you off guard. Let's schedule it out a week and then we'll come back. But this tip for today about warming up a cold call when they answer is in case you just get right into it, right? And so I'm bypassing what I teach is the best process. And I'm just saying, if you get caught into it and you find yourself talking, remember that the whole point of a phone call, when you're talking to somebody, a first sales call in particular, is you're trying to get to know as fast as you can. You would like to get to yes as fast as you can as well. But the whole point is you don't want to sit there and spend a lot of time with somebody who's eventually going to be a no. We often will dance around the topics, etc., and not really giving the other person an opportunity to realize that we're a no for them. And so we'll spend the whole hour talking to them. Or worse, we'll spend several meetings and the answer is really coming back to no. And so it's really important that you get to a no fast. And the way you do that is by giving them chances to say no to you. So on the flip side, though, is in sales, I want to get them to say a lot of yeses. If they say no's fast, then we abandon the call, right? They abandon it, I abandon it. It just makes sense to go away. But in sales, the way I get them to start buying from me is I get them to say yes a lot. And I'm not trying to trick them. I'm trying to have a dialogue with them that I understand their needs and I understand my product and I can get to that. But it begins with something very simple for getting to yeses. This is what warms up that cold call, right? Is they didn't know me a second ago. And so I'm trying to warm them up and get past that really frigid point. The first thing I like to say to people is right when I get them, they say, hi, this is John, or they just say, well, hopefully they say their name compared to what? But they say, hi, this is John. I say, hey, hi, John. My name is 𝗚𝗎𝗓𝗏. Am I catching you at a good time? The cool thing is you're going to get a pretty similar set of answers, right? The first one almost always is going to be yes. Sure, what's this about? Right? My absolute favorite answer you're going to get is no. What's this about? I'm like, wait a minute. If the answer's, if I'm not catching you at a good time, why do you want to know what this is about? But the idea generally is you say, am I catching you a good time? You're showing them respect for their time, and they have a chance to say no. I've had people say no to me, and then they're like, but I'm going to be free in an hour. Why don't we talk? Which I love. It's like the best thing, right? But most parts, they just say, sure, what's this about? And then the next level of type of questions I might ask are ones around, here's some examples that I have here, right? I like reading a strategic plan. Remember I said you focus on an agency. So let's say my agency target was EPA. I don't want to do a ton of research, but I do want to look at their strategic plan, which is usually 25 pages, maybe 50, but a few pages that I could look at in 15, 20 minutes to understand high level goals, et cetera. So I can say to them, hey, I was looking at EPA's strategic plan and had a few questions, if that'd be okay. Right? And then I pause, by the way, when I sit there and say, if that'd be okay, the implication is it okay? But I don't want to ask, is it okay? Because is it okay gets too close to what we call a closed question. There's nowhere for them to go. I want an open question. It's a little broader. So often what'll happen here is even if they don't say yes and no in their head, they're kind of thinking to themselves, well, what are your questions? Maybe I talk about them, maybe I don't or something. And so that kind of a question allows me to then go in and talk about their organization. By the way, when you're doing cold calling, you are not selling Girl Scout cookies. It's transactional, one and done. Hey, hi, I'm here selling cookies. You want to buy them, right? That's one and done transactional sales. You're building a relationship. Doesn't matter whether it's a teammate or a federal buyer. You're building a relationship, and so you want to sit there and really begin to get to know them. There's a great line in sales you should just remember. Nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. Nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. And so if you're coming at them saying, hey, I was looking at your strategic plan and I had a few questions, you legitimately should have a few questions, right? I see your goal is to really accelerate the government's use of AI or your agency's use of AI to protect the environment. What's really the driver behind that or whatever, right? Your expertise. This gives you a chance to start talking about it. And that's kind of the end of it. You've warmed up that cold call. Now it's in a whole different thing where you're building a relationship. Another way to ask that same type of question, right? Am I catching a good time? Sure, yeah. I was hoping to get on your schedule for an intro call. Would that be okay? Right? The softest I can make a closed question is, would that be okay? And the reason I put it that way is you feel kind of brutal to somebody saying, would that be okay? To say no, right? But again, half the people will say no. No, that's just fine. But here I'm trying to transfer it from, I just caught you. Can we schedule an intro call? And you can go watch a whole training that I talk about how to walk through everything to say and do as you're scheduling that. But my very best or favorite way of reaching out to somebody, if I have the opportunity to do this, and this is very easy to do when you go to an event, you see a bunch of speakers. I just go down through the speaker list. But here I wrote, for example, if you follow me and saw a post I did this morning, I shared out an AI presentation that the U.S. Customs Border Protection from DHS did. And they did it in May, but I didn't get a chance to see it. I didn't even know it happened. But I got it. I loved it. They were talking about challenges. They were talking about what they want from industry. And they had these key players. And so I could reach out and cold call one of those key players and say to them, hey, I missed your presentation on AI, but I was hoping to ask you a few questions. And by the way, you notice how I didn't say, would that be okay? Sometimes I do that where you just kind of pause at the end of your statement. I missed your presentation on AI, but I was hoping to ask you a few questions. And then you just shut up, right? I say it softer. Then you stop talking, right? And then you stop talking and the other person's going to fill that void with, sure, let's talk. Nah, this is not a good time. Nah, read my slides. That was good enough. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You're kind of saying, hey, the ball is on your side of the court, of the net. Come back to me, right? Okay, so those are some things you can do that will warm up a cold call. You want to have a couple of those ready that you're comfortable with, so you get to a couple of those yeses right out of the gate. that just make them feel comfortable with you. And again, even though I'm saying yeses, it's totally okay to get to no's, and I don't want to talk to you when when you realize that it's just the wrong person to talk to. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is following up. I get this question all the time. In fact, I literally got this question this morning. We wrote an RFI and we tried to reach out, but we hadn't heard back from somebody. Other people say it a little differently. I reached out. I'm trying to reach this government person. I haven't heard back. What should I do? How often should I respond, et cetera? And I want to give you some tips around following up to people who don't respond. So the first thing is really remember, and this goes to your entire sales activity. Anytime you pick up the phone, send an email, these people are 100% just like you and me. They go home, they're mowing the lawn, they've got kids or cars to take care of, they've got this activity, they get a ton of emails, they get spams, all these things, they are just you. Literally, when they walk out of the government in that really special position they are in as a federal buyer that we want to talk to, they end up 3 doors down and they're your neighbor or something. So remember, they're just like you. And when you reach out to them and they don't get back to you, they're just busy. My rule is if you didn't get back to me, then the answer is still yes. And I just got to get you to say it. Unless they say no, the answer is yes or maybe, but it sure is not no, right? If they don't say no, leave me alone. And by the way, I'm always assuming you're being professional out there, but be persistent. Follow up on a regular basis. Let them say no. A contracting officer, a program manager, a small business specialist, a teammate or a potential teammate, if they don't get back to you, they're not sitting there going, oh, I'm not going to get back to them, right? They're going to sit there and get back to you, especially if you're persistent and you follow up. But the thing that we sometimes do is we take it personal. They didn't get back to me, right? And we begin to think of reasons on why they didn't get back to me. Must be something with me. Do they not like the blue shirt? Are they jerks? Man, this is mean or something. It's like, no, they didn't see your email or it got buried or something. I literally get 200 emails easily a day. And it's like, whew, people I want to talk to. Now, my customers, I have flags, so I don't miss those. But new people who are coming in that I'd love to connect and talk with, I'm like, oh, I got to talk to you. And then it goes away. I have literally been in conversations with a customer when I finally connect with like a contracting officer. I'm so sorry. I know I got your email and your voicemail. I meant to get back to you, but I was busy. I'm like, you don't have to apologize to me. We're all busy. But never answer for them. Let them say no, not you. People ask me, how often should I follow up? Every 3 to 4 days. Anything longer than you're not serious. If you're serious about meeting with these people, follow up with them. You send an email out or a phone call on Monday, Wednesday or Thursday, you're doing the opposite, so stagger back and forth the email and the voicemails. And then you're following back up. By the way, don't believe a single person that says voicemails, oh, don't do that or something. It's like, why would you believe them? That's like saying, don't be on Twitter or don't be here. I'm saying that there's certain ways that are best, but no one really does voicemails anymore. So if you get a voicemail in, I do that myself. I get 1 or 2 voicemails. I listen to them. I get 200 emails. I don't actually even look at many of them. What makes the voicemail more important? It's because there's less. I can look at the transcript. I can listen to it really quick. And so you've reached me. And you could do the same thing with a government buyer or a teammate if you just follow up with them. And you're basically every 3-4 days just bringing it up to the top of the email list. And then so here's my answer to you, right? When should you give up? And there's 2 answers, right? Never, which I'll talk about in a second. But the other is when you get what you want. So I was saying we're doing outreach and we're doing cold calls into the Army because we want to build relationships. Well, if I'm reaching out to 100 people and they're not getting back and I'm being persistent, but then eventually 4 or 8 of them, I got traction. Well, then I can kind of forget about these other people for a second as I develop these relationships. Because if I develop the relationships with the people who have got back to me, they will introduce me to somebody else. They will help me succeed in the Army. They will be able to let me borrow their kind of the fact that I'm talking to them. Other people will go, oh, if you're talking to Sally, I'll talk to you, kind of thing, right? And so you can give up at that point on your broader outreach if you hit your goal. The other part, though, is if you haven't hit your goal and you say, well, how often should I keep following up? Every 3 to 4 days? Forever, until you get what you want. If you're trying to win a multi-million-dollar or $50 million contract in the government and you're doing capture, don't stop calling. And people are like, oh, you might be bothering the contracting officer. Don't listen to any of them. They're not salespeople. Salespeople who succeed follow up with the customer. You don't make them mad, right? So you follow up respectfully, politely, really, oh, hey, don't want to bother you. Just coming back, one quick question or something. You figure out a way to be polite and never invasive, but you never give up until you get what you're looking for, because that's our job, right? And then same thing. If these people are needed, then never give up. There's certain people like this CIO, I really need to build a relationship. I'll take it slow, but I'm never going to give up. Okay, so here's what I want you to remember as you head into the rest of your day here about cold calling. First thing is make sure you're realistic about your purpose and about how many people are going to get back to you, right? And then get to that no fast and be okay with getting to the no fast. If you reach out to somebody, they go, oh, that's not for us. That's cool. I need 88 no's or something, 98 no's to get the 2 yeses that I want. I'm totally okay with a no. And the last thing is just remember, you should persistently follow up until you get what you were looking for. So if you're looking to try to get into an agency and you get a couple of relationships, you can slow down on the cold calling. If you get the answers you're looking for in an opportunity, you can back off a little bit on the outreach. But otherwise, persistence will lead to success. Hey, by the way, speaking of cold calling and outreach, our BD Accelerator workshops designed especially in this world. So if you're doing $1 million plus and you're looking to accelerate your company, especially around getting into new agency doors and doing those cold calls, put workshop in the chat. Happy to talk to you about it. I'll send you a link where you can apply. We're lining up our cohort for September now. And so we're doing our interviews through the month of August, but just reach out if you're interested. For all of us, as you go forward doing cold calls, just remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.